How is it going, YouTube? Malagant here. So we are going to be talking about the character that we ended up creating. It is the Spellbreaker. Once again, the reason behind the Spellbreaker was simply put, if you haven't been watching the VODs that I've been uploading, it is simply because like Arcanist and Nightblade, definitely like my favorite masteries in this game. On top of that, like cold damage is also my favorite type as well, like the animations, the damage type, the slow effect, the freeze obviously, and the arsenal that is available to you both from like the devotions, both from Nightblade and Arcanist as well. And at the same time, to be honest with you, when it comes to like cold, you can find bunch of like minus elemental resistances, here and there. You can find like something really cool from like elemental things also, especially. But we are going to be talking about a lot of those stuff like during this video. So the purpose of this video is going to be not necessarily a build guide, so to speak, but I'll try to like, maybe it can be some sort of like a how the build has been going, and I can try to explain like basically what I have been trying to do overall with the character and how it has been going, and reflecting as well. So we can talk about the devotions to start with. How did I like end up making such a devotion setup? To be honest with you, like how it's ended up happening is that like, when you're like elemental, we're full cold right now using chosen scar shard, and we are using the buff from the lethal assault. So I'm meleeing every now and then with my lethal assault so that like I have a 4-second buff from there. And then on top of that, we are pretty mobile. With the shadow strike, I'll be showcasing. We have like minus resistance aura for the cold. We have like cooldown reduction, cold multipliers. We have a lot of frostburn coming from like both chosen scar shard and the flash freeze. So like our main abilities are probably the flash freeze to like freeze the screen and put it a bit of a dot as well. And on top of that, this is like our nuke, the chosen scar shard, and I would say like it is the bread and butter for the character as well. So that being said, when we are going for something like this, what is it? Like it's an elemental, right? We must take elemental storm. Elemental storm is like, is if you are familiar with minus resistances in this game, it's one of the multipliers in the game. Basically, like it's a must to have if you are elemental. So in this case, we are cold. We must go for this. So I built up to this by using basically Quill and also Scholar's Light. Afterwards, we were able to like remove the Scholar's Light when I have gotten my green from Chariot, basically. So Chariots ended up like paying for this later on. Chariots is like a good, okayish commitment, I would say. The payback is very good for the Chariot, for this character especially. It gives like a lot of offensive ability. It gives quite a lot of actually like, let's say, sustain, in my opinion. I cannot necessarily say like for like if you look at this, like this one definitely scales with like your cooldown reduction, and then you have like a 7-second duration of like an okayish heal that is kicking in. Not necessarily like the greatest heal, to be honest with you. It's okay, but at the same time you have 120 defensive ability, which is quite nice. And then afterwards there's about like 12 seconds downtime. But like, time and time again, I did mention this in my videos, that is like about like a 50-50 off time. And if you think about it, you engage a hard fight. When you engage a hard fight, this should, relatively proc most of the time. And then in about like 8 seconds or 10 seconds, it will be, the fight will be over anyways, right? Like you will end up killing the boss or whatever it is, that hard fight that you're fighting with, unless it is like a super boss or a nemesis. And you will get pretty much like quite a lot of value out of this. It's the same thing goes for like inspiration. It's a very, very good like offensive and defensive ability proc. On top of that, it's also giving you like reduced entrapment duration, slow resistance, and on top of that, a massive energy generation as well, so that like you can keep on pumping those Trojan Scar shards. This one has a very good uptime, 6 seconds uptime, and then afterwards 8-second downtime. Same goes for like the rumor. We had to go for the rumor simply because it's minus cold resistance. As you know, like when it comes to the resistance reductions, for instance, look at the last line over here. It says elemental resistance 32 reduced. It doesn't have a minus, so you can only take one of this type. And then this one will continue and stack with the minus percentage ones. So in this case, we have like minus percentage coming from this, minus percentage cold. You can take as many minus percentage as you can. So for instance, you can check out this one over here, minus 30% cold resistance. That one stacks as well with all the ones that we have gotten so far. And the last one that we're going to have is this one, basically in the end of Ultos. It's about like 23% at the end. It will be 25% the next level. It's pretty big. And this is basically tied to my blade spirit. These little spirits that are like following me around and hitting. It's just doesn't necessarily deal that much damage, but they're pretty good to proc the Ultos, and Ultos is like good AoE clear, and on top of that it's reduction to elemental resistances as well. So one thing that I can mention is that like the paybacks for this build, like if you pay close attention to this, how many tier 1s do we have? We have the Quill, and then we have Sailor's Guide, right? Those are 2 tier 1s. There's not so many devotion specs out there that is like capable of building such value, you know, only 2 tier 1s. And then afterwards, if you think about it, like Rumor over here, the Murmur, is giving you back like 2 red, 2 green. The Chariot, very good payback, 3 green, you know, 2 red. And then this one, very good payback again, you know, 2 blue, 2 yellow. So they're kind of like paying for each other, and you're able to basically like bounce in between. This one has very good payback as well, the Salome Watcher. They're kind of like, as I said, like paying for each other, and you're able to like bounce in between the devotions instead of like building up to them by you know, tier 1s that you wouldn't like to take in the first place. Notice I have 1 point into the empty throne or the stun reduction. It is definitely something that I can remove later on if I can get some stun reduction from somewhere else. I would like to sit about like 40%, 50% all the time in hardcore stun reduction at the very least. Yeah, there's about like 3 points that I commit into the Giant's Blood. Okay, shielding. Every now and then it's proccing as well. It helps. It helps. Remember, like, we're playing a caster here. It doesn't necessarily scale from your weapon damage. It doesn't necessarily utilize that many abilities other than ABB, but I cannot really trust on ABB. I'm a spellcaster. I cannot really like stand in melee range with targets. So that is really easy to say that like it is not necessarily utilizing like lifesteal. That was my point. Did space out a little bit. So since I don't have lifesteal, I gotta get to sustain somewhere, right? So we have health potion obviously, and then on top of that, like, we have the pneumatic burst that's coming from the Nightblade. I am considering to put like more points into this. We are going to be talking about the skill points a little bit here and there too, and the itemization for sure. The character is not that easy to play. So basically, yeah, just to finish the sentence off before spacing out, Wayward Soul and the Giant's Blood is basically giving me the sustain that I need, yeah. For sure. Just the extra thing, it's not necessarily that reliable, definitely not, but you can definitely feel when you have them like leveled up, they're helping out a ton, for sure. I wouldn't say like they're going to be saving me from death, not necessarily. I think it just like makes for like a better or like a fluid character. So we can talk about what the character is trying to do. The reason that I like really enjoy playing Nightblades and Arcanists is that like there's a lot of extremely valuable skills in these masteries. What I mean by that is like there's all these little nodes everywhere that is giving you even for just like spending 1 point into it, it is giving you like quite a lot of value, let's say. And that is one thing that I really like in Grim Dawn. You know what I mean? Because like there's a lot of items out there that are capable of like giving you pluses to these either random skills and masteries or just like straight out +1 to everything. So if we TP back to like town from here, I can show you my necklace, for instance. We have been using this necklace ever since level 70 or something, 75 maybe. This was a craft, the essence of Beronath. That's another thing that I'm going to mention. This character, even though it is a new character, it's a fresh account, solo southbound, no trade, and I didn't have any items in the bank, no components either. It is capable of getting up to strong, up to a point that is like very strong to like do some very good milestones for the hardcore accounts. So look at the +1, for instance, from here. This gives you +1 to everything, right? So every single click that I have taken from here, they increase in value. Same goes for the Arcanist. Now, on top of this, one more thing that I would like to mention is that, like, for instance, I would like to sit on 12 over here, right? but we have +1 coming from our necklace. So I can take away from this one, then we have 1 more point to spend. That's not the only skill. We have like that one that I can sit on 12, that one that I can sit on 12. Also, what I'm getting there is that like I want to change my relic, for instance, soon enough. I'm gonna make it Morgdragon Ardor. It is a very, very expensive relic to craft. Like it's a ridiculous pet build relic actually, but it's in my opinion one of the better relics in the entire game, and it definitely suits my playstyle. Simply because you will understand when I mouse over it right over here. As you can see, for my character, we're going to gain flat HP, we're going to gain +1 to all skills, as I have been just explaining, I really value it. We're going to gain completion bonus, and we will also gain an aura that is going to give me 8% total speed. So, back to this point right over here, we're going to have +1 to this, +1 to that. I want you to understand +1 to everywhere. But specifically, I want you to focus on these like 12 out of 12s that I would like to keep them at 12 out of 12. So I'm going to remove 1 from this, I'm going to remove 1 from that, I'm going to remove that, that's 4 so far, right? I'll most likely remove 1 over here as well because you cannot get to 27. So even though I am getting +1 to everything, I'm also getting +8 or something out of nowhere because I would like to sit on, you know, some sweet spots already. So it is enough, so +1 from there too, yeah. That is just ridiculous, and all these things are adding up and making for a character as strong as this one. Now, is this character strong? It is very offensive, it's incredibly fun to play, it's an incredibly active character. What I mean by active is that there's a lot of buttons, there's lots of utility especially. That's why I like Arcanist and Nightblade in the first place. So we have like freeze, we have a jump, we have spells to cast, and on top of that we have an immunity that we can use. The mirror, I could actually like put 1 more point if I wanted to blade barrier, so we would have double immunity. That is scaling with our cooldown reduction as well, and we do have some cooldown reduction, about like 28% or something. You can definitely get it. And we have one of the better spells in the entire game, the notification, that we can like either dispel offensively or defensively. So it is pretty hard to play. It's not necessarily the best beginner friendly character out there, but I've been having a blast with this, and that is also the reason to conclude this entire conclusion discussion, or like, you know, sentence, why I have gone with Spellbreaker one more time. It's incredibly fun to play, definitely. The first character is like, I have a video on YouTube, if you know, it's called like the Milestones. I think over there I'm mentioning like what you would like to do with like a character that you're starting your first character, you know, in the account, or like you reset your account. What would you like to do? It is basically the Milestones is all about that. So you're going to be spending a lot of time on that character, especially if you survive the hardcore. You're going to be doing like a lot of hectic farming, you're going to be doing a lot of like reputation grind, you're going to be farming iron beds, you're going to be farming, right now I am doing that, which is rare materials like ancient hearts, you know, blood of chthons and tainted brain matters and stuff like that, and it takes a very, very long time. And on top of everything, you're gonna need to, like, you know, not only survive, but also it needs to be something that your play style is good, but also have fun, so that like you don't burn out. Because if you don't luck out these milestones, and if you say that, okay, I'm gonna just like change my character, go to the next character, you don't necessarily like complete the milestones so much, so therefore like you're kind of wasting time. All that time that you sunk in might be, you know, not so much worthy or something, if that makes any sense. So that is also why it was the Spellbreaker here. Let's talk about skills a little bit, what skills I have been taking, how I leveled it up. If you didn't watch like the VODs, that's, to be honest with you, completely understandable that they're incredibly long. Obviously, I'm a streamer, so but I am trying to make as much YouTube content as possible also, such as this one right now. So we are gaining a little bit of like frostburn and crit damage from the elemental balance, and I would say like elemental balance is the only reason why we have the points over here. This one is just a value click. If you're new to Grim Dawn, 4 points into this, it's not 4 points, it's just literally 1 point into it. It is 4 because I have +3 to Arcanist from my items. So every single 4 that you see is only 1 click. So if I would click this once, it would become 4. That is also why these pluses are ridiculously important and very powerful, especially in a mastery like Arcanist. We have the Maven. I didn't necessarily max this out, not even right now. Like you could definitely go to the ultimate ranks, which is like higher than 12. Um, right now it's not so great, but if you can find some items that are like specifically giving Maven pluses, then we could definitely go to somewhat about like 20. I think that is where it is shining. If you cannot raise this up to like 20, I would say like it's not that worth it. You can just sit on 12. What this does is basically it gives you damage absorption. So like flat out damage reduction, percentage damage reduction in this case is 20% for us. It is good for ultimate difficulty. Before the ultimate difficulty, if you're gonna die with Maven, you would probably die, well, it's the other way around. Like if you're gonna die without Maven, you'll probably die with it too. That's probably a misplay, or like, you know, a misplay on the part of like optimization of your character, I would say. That being said, though, 3 points into the Maven while leveling is just more than enough. It's going to give you 10% absorption reduction, and it is very, very valuable. So 3 points only. Just a 1 pointer over here, very valuable. Stun duration reduction, freeze reduction, slow resistance, reduce to petrify duration, and then at the same time, it also gives a little bit of like absorption energy from the spell. So you can actually like gain energy back while taking spell damage. That's what it means. We have obviously the flash freeze. I did try to like max this out as soon as possible. I kind of like went in between, I think, a little bit like at the same time. I think like flash freeze and chosen at the same time while I was leveling, simply because like some of the enemies are completely immune to flash freeze. For how flash freeze works is that if you're unfamiliar with it, basically what it does is that it gives this like massive AoE blast. But if there's a target that is like immune to freeze or very resistant to freeze, it will just ignore this entire spell. It will do absolutely nothing to it. And guess what? Most of the bosses or like some of the elites and very specific some of the monsters are completely immune to this spell. So therefore it is usually better to like go with a single target right next to it. And that was the chosen. So that like we don't necessarily have a nightmare on one of the first bosses, even though we are trying to rush and level up fast. That being said, our bread and butter, as I said, like it was chosen Scar Shard, and we are luckily sitting on ultimate ranks thanks to like having some of the luckier drops over here. One of them was like Eastern gloves. The other ones, I really want to talk about them. They're on my hands. One of them is my weapon. The other one is my caster off, and I'm going to talk about them. And those are like pretty much enabling this build in the first place. They're ridiculously strong. How chosen Sky Shard works is that it's 3 meteors. You can later on, if you're very lucky, if you can find some like legendaries for this build, you could actually like increase the amount of meteors, which would be ridiculously strong, obviously, but they're very rare items. And on top of that, these meteors, they're kind of spreading, they're not necessarily that easy to cast, and the worst part about this spell is that like on the doorways, if you're fighting something, most of the time the meteors are going to be crashing on top of the doorway. In this case, somehow it's going through. I have no idea how, but if you have been watching my kills, there you go, you can have it right over there. So if there is a monster right over there, my 2 chosen meteors are crashing over there. So that's probably like the worst part of this. Otherwise, it's a very, very reliable and a low cooldown heavy nuke. On top of that, it's also giving you a freeze, which this character has a lot of that. A frostburn, as you know, it is the damage over time of cold. So it is going against the target's cold resistance, and it does scale from there as well. So it has like its own crit damage as well, which is very important. So as long as you can crit, it's going to be scaling even further with the crits. Very, very good. So from here, let's jump into these 2 items that I wanted to talk about, because now that I mentioned the chosen, so this is one of them. This is a specific modifier, Spectral Bludgeon, and this item right over here is capable of dropping from like every single ghost out there. I think they're called ghosts. The easier one to farm most likely is going to be the cave inside the foothills. Basically, there's a cave over there. If you just like walk towards the right side from this foothills rift, you'll be able to find the cave entrance. There's a bunch of like ghosts over there. You can farm this item over there. It's any level almost. The same thing can be said in the Dungeon of Kilrian or Steps of Torment. So basically all those white ghosts, they're capable of dropping. And what does this item do for the chosen is that if you read the last sentence on it, it says 100% lightning damage converted to cold damage. Like, that's just massive. So basically, we don't necessarily need to scale lightning anymore. we can just focus on cold, we can just focus on cold minus resistance, and therefore we'll be reaching, you know, a lot higher, and it will be a lot easier to build up as well. And it also gives like extra frostburn damage to my Chosen as well. It's pretty good. On top of everything, it gives pluses to flash freeze. It gives 1 more second duration to flash freeze. It is kind of whatever, I suppose, that one. And it gives +3 to frozen core as well. Frozen core is this thing. One gimmicky thing that you can do with this build is that, like, if you would like to, you can put 1 point into this. And instead of running this offhand, you can run a secondary Spectral Bludgeon. In that case, you're going to have, obviously, you're going to still have the same amount of like damage converted to cold. It will not change anything. But on top of everything, you can have like +3 more onto the frozen core. You're going to have like more frostburn damage on top of your Chosen Scar Shard. So your Chosen Scar Shard is going to be more damage over time instead of what I'm going to be talking about right now. So this offhand right over here, the Rolderethis, is another MI basically. It's the guy that we just killed over there actually. But if I'm not mistaken, he didn't drop. I haven't been paying attention, but yeah, he didn't drop it. We can reset our game and go for him one more time. So I've been farming him quite a bit. I think the offhand actually like exists for most of the levels, but you don't necessarily need this till the late game, where your Chosen Scar Shard is basically very, very strong. What this MI does for the Chosen Scar Shard is that, like, obviously minus 0.5 second skill recharge to the TSS. That means that like lower cooldown, which is very important. It's already had like low cooldown, and now it's even lower, 1.7 now. It was 2.2, I suppose. It also scales with like your cooldown reduction that's coming from here, or the offhand. And then another interesting thing that I want you to pay attention is that like minus 1.5 meter target area. What that does is that, like, without this offhand, if you pay attention, my meteors are spreading. Like, for instance, this was a very questionable cast. If the monster is over there, it is only gonna hit him, you know, with 1 meteor. That was an okayish cast. That was okay too. But you will probably understand what I say. Like, this one is the spread one as well. So when we put this on, it is actually like closing the cone where the meteors are coming closer to each other. At first, you might think that's a bad thing. No, it is not. Basically because, like, as long as you click on your target, it will just make sure that every single meteor hits him, so therefore you shotgun him. Now, at the very beginning, I mentioned that you can actually, like, increase the amount of meteors Chosen Scar Shard has, which I don't necessarily have such an item yet. But if I would have it in that case, it would be ridiculously powerful with such an item. On top of everything, it's also giving +3 to Trozen, so therefore we are sitting on 26 over here reliably. It is very important. That is also why it is like build enabling, so to speak. It is making the spell that much more stronger, definitely. About the Nightblade side, like, it's very simple. After, you know, Nightblade is all about the mobility for the most part, and the cold resistance reduction to like an aura around me. That is this spell, the Veil of Shadow. Other than that, like, after using my mobility, I am also, at the very least, if it's an elite enemy, I'm trying to like use my blade burst, just my left click a little bit. The only reason is because of the lethal assault. It's a 4-second buff. The 4-second buff is giving you like cold damage, it's giving you frostburn damage multipliers. On top of that, it's also giving you, most importantly, 100 offensive ability. Pretty good. Very good. And that flat offensive ability, you know, it scales with like the procs that you have, if you have any, obviously. So we have Tenebris here, we can attack him once, and we can freeze everything, and then just basically keep on spamming the Chosen. Obviously, some targets are dying a lot slower than the others. It's completely normal. That's always the case for RPGs. But some targets are just going to disappear. And to be honest with you, the RDPS is very good. So this guy has some sort of an aura. You can dispel him with the nullification. for the most part, our build is incredibly strong in melee range, simply because like you are making sure that your target is staying inside. If you're in melee, your target won't move because it's already in melee, you know, it will try to attack you. So you're making sure that like your blade spirits are attacking it all the time. You're making sure that your target is inside the elemental storm. You're making sure that you're in range for your aura to be working. So everything is working at the same time. And obviously you have absolutely no downtime on Chosen since you're spamming the right button all the time. So that is when you shine the most. We actually ended up finding one more offend. Unfortunately, it's not an upgrade. We're gonna need to keep on coming here. The offend that I have is not necessarily a good one. It was one of the offends that I found actually like while leveling up. I decided to like hit this place while I'm passing in elite and ended up being lucky because I found like a high skill cooldown reduction roll, and well, I found it in the first place because he doesn't drop it every time. But this is the guy that you need to farm basically in this cave, and you can come here from the flooded passage right over there. So I think I'm going to conclude this video over here. You can watch the entire series. This character started with like an account reset. Some people were like asking me, why would you do that? Like, that is the stupidest question I have ever heard. It's basically, you know, I'm playing an ARPG. I had literally everything in the bank. Like, it feels a little bit, after taking a break like that, you come back to the game, you start playing and you're like, okay, I have this item too, I have that item too, then what the hell am I doing? You know what I mean? It's like a complete game sort of. Now the Forgotten Gods is coming. Just reset my account. Basically, I'm gonna have so much more fun just building this. I already had incredibly fun. We have like about 15 parts of Spellbreaker on YouTube. I think it's also a lot better for both my Twitch and YouTube channels, for sure. For the content, for the sake of content, it's a lot better too. Apparently we ended up finding a spectral bludgeon in there too, so you could potentially farm the bludgeon inside there too, but there isn't that many ghosts in that place. I'll definitely like farm it somewhere else. We can talk about finally some other things as well. There's the elemental balance rings. You might have seen it while I'm fighting. They're like swirly animations that are like rolling around my character. They're very strong, but not only for this character. You can definitely use these. They're for level 82. Right now they say that's they're level 90 because of the augmentation that I, you know, used on them. Yeah, the swirly thing that you see that is turning around my character, they're dealing incredible damage, you guys, both to single targets or AoE clear. The only thing is like you kind of need to get used to like controlling them. What I mean by that is that if it ever collides with like a wall or like a barrel, anything around you, it would disappear. So it keeps on turning like this. If I would get close to a wall, bam, it disappears. You understand what I'm saying? So you're gonna need to like have some sort of like a good positioning, but they hit very hard. And even if you're playing a character, just look at that, like it was 15,000 crits. Even if you're playing a character that doesn't necessarily have that much AoE, this will bring the entire AoE to you. Then you're gonna need to basically like just control your character good. And any sort of like elemental character, these rings would go. Are they like best in slots? Maybe for some characters. For this character it will be best in slot for some time to come, in my opinion, because I literally don't have any arsenal, you know, waiting for me in my bank. But after farming for a really long time, maybe I'll find something better, who knows. For some characters, it probably is actually best in slot because it's ridiculous. It's, you know, it's on the fragile side of things. It doesn't necessarily offer like any sort of defensiveness at all. But the best part about it is that they're craftable and they're relatively cheap. I think it takes about like 16 ancient hearts. So you could definitely farm that in a day, so to speak. Probably. On top of that, I also ended up crafting like mythical Trojan hats, which we should mention. This one, contrary to the offhand, it mentions 0.2 meter radius to the Trojan sky shard. What that means is that I am assuming it is actually making the radius of the meteor bigger. So it's not that relevant, to be honest with you, as long as like you place your cursor in the right place to like cast. Maybe while your target is moving away, it might be relevant actually, because like it will be catching it. Other than that, it also gives some lightning damage to Trojan, but we do end up converting it, so it's extra cold damage for us basically. and it says like +1 to everything, and Arcanist as well. We have +1 to everything in our belts too. I luckily found this, so those two are like probably my best finds, and the rest of my items are like kind of mediocre items while I found while leveling. And the top side you see is all crafts. Every single one of them is crafted. Like these two I already explained, but these four are all crafted. That is also why I would like to mention that this is an okayish. Like if you can play this character, if you think that you can survive the hardcore with a character like this one, or if you're in softcore, like you could definitely play this as a starter character as well, simply because like the build enabling items are either crafted or they are farmable very easily. That is also why it was a Spellbreaker in the first place. I really hope this video was useful, guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll be seeing you next time. Peace out, YouTube. Have a good night.